Hello and welcome to the Story Engine podcast. My name is Kyle Gray, and today on the show we have Bill Blankschaen. Bill is a master at helping people craft authority through authorship. And we are going to talk about his unique approach to book writing. We have a lot of authors and a lot of experts who support authors on this show. And it's always fun to hear and dig into each of their unique perspectives in how to get a book to achieve major business goals. So we're going to hear from Bill on that today. So without any further ado, let's hand it over to Bill Blankschaen. Bill Blankschaen, welcome to the Story Engine podcast.
Well, Kyle, great to be here. Love talking stories and getting them started. And the story is what drives so much of our lives. So I'm looking forward to talking about it.
Well, you're certainly in an audience full of storytelling lovers now. And before we dive into that goodness, would you tell us a little bit about who you are and how you're showing up in the world today?
Well, yeah. When I talk about my story, I always grew up when I was a kid, I was a storyteller. I love stories. I love reading stories, love writing stories, loved all things pertaining to that. But then as I kind of grew older, kind of life happens, right? And I ended up helping to start a private school and leading that for a dozen years. And it was only about 14, 15 years ago that I decided I had this calling within me to be a storyteller, to be a writer and so forth. And I made the decision to step away from that and step out into this direction. And so long story short, I can be happy to unpack more of the story in our time together. But out of that, stepping into that and going through that came Story Builders, which is who we are and what we do, and the company that I lead, which is all about telling stories that make the world a better place. It's helping individuals and organizations tell their stories well, turn it into books, turn into IP products, all those kind of fun things. And we've been doing that ever since. So I think the last part of your question, though, is how is my day, right? Or well, how am I showing up today, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm showing up today with just a lot of energy and enthusiasm for all of it, and being possibility of helping people live better stories.
Amazing. So you say you wanted to be a writer. What kind of writing did you want to do? How did you picture yourself when you were thinking of those aspirations?
A lot of that was nonfiction, somewhat inspirational, somewhat just messages that lift people up, that make the world a better place. Even as a kid, I did a ton of reading. I was like a weird teenager, man. I was like the kid that was reading, the nerdy kid reading all the books, like learning and all those kind of things. And I was the one who, by the way, who would ride my bike to the library when I was 14 years old and read Shakespeare in the corner of the library. Right? So I was not normal by any stretch of the definition.
Can
But
you
all of
name
that,
some authors? Like when I think of what you just described, there are several authors that I immediately think of, and I kind of like aspire to myself. Who fits that mold for you?
yeah, I think, John Maxwell was a big influence, especially as a young adult, reading a lot of John's stuff. And I've been privileged to work with John for the last 10 years, developing other things. And so that kind of style, um, people in that space, even like a Zig Ziglar, people like that. Especially when I was younger, had a kind of a Renaissance approach. I'd read a lot of different things because what I learned about myself was I really love absorbing that information and then creatively connecting dots between things that maybe weren't connected before, and coming up with new ideas and ways of pulling that together. Yeah. So a lot of people in that space, from even things like theology to business to life to science, just kind of this diverse reading of things that I thought contributed to making my story better and positioning me in that way.
Yeah. And how does this passion for writing nonfiction, or this original artistic aspiration, does it influence the work you do now? And or does the work you do now give you the space to exercise that desire in a new way?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, this is what I do all day, every day, is helping people take those messages that they have to share and share them with the world. And I think it comes from my own experience of feeling like, all right, I have a message to share. I have a calling. I have these gifts that I want to put to work. And I kind of felt stuck where I was. I was doing good work, but I wasn't doing what I felt like I was really meant to do, right? That I wasn't reaching that potential. And so when I stepped out from the school and stepped out in this new direction. It was really fueled by this desire to, I want to do what I've loved to do since I was a kid. And I want to do that all day, every day. Right. And so we went through that whole season, which was not an easy season at all, with 6 kids, especially. We went a year with no income in order to do this. But I never worked harder in my life because just became such a student of storytelling and just diving in and studying it and books and proposals and all this whole space and publishers and all that, and so, yeah, I mean, that really fueled what I do all day, every day, is help take those messages and bring them to life, writing with other people and with our team coming alongside to help other people bring those messages to life.
So tell us about these messages. And before we know what the messages are, we need to know the people that you serve. Tell us about some of like the kinds of people that you work with and serve, and then how are you applying story to their businesses?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, the kind of people we serve are people who feel like they have this meaningful message inside of them that they know would do more good in the world if they could just tell it better, if they could just share it better, if they could just get it out better in some way. Often they're having some success already doing that, but they feel like they've just hit a ceiling and I can't figure out how to break through that and how to tell it well in a really brand defining way. And that's where we really excel, is that brand defining storytelling, right? So we can work with individuals as well known as like Lewis Howes and Dean Graziosi and people in that space and the health space and all those places, but also people who are just putting that together and figuring it out and thinking, I think I have a message here and I think I have a story that's worth telling and sharing with the world, but I need help elevating it and making it something special. So especially people who are entrepreneurs or entrepreneurial in spirit, business professionals who have, a career or a track record of success that they've had, speakers, authors, all those kind of people, thought leaders, essentially, or aspiring thought leaders who are trying to come together. And what we do is we help them build what I call your story ecosystem. And that is figuring out what's your message, what's your main message, and your message maker. We call that your brand story. Get clear on your brand story, and then how you're going to multiply that message, often through the form of a book or a signature speech or something like that. We focus on books as that medium. I know you do a lot of work in the speaking space.
Hmm.
Then how do you monetize it further into courses, workshops, trainings, memberships, all those kind of fun things that can be built around that. And that's really what we do, is help people build out that story ecosystem, with the book as that central portion, that hub at the middle of it.
Okay. So I'm curious if somebody who maybe didn't know that they need story, but was experiencing all of these problems, was sitting across the table from not you at a coffee shop. Um, I would love to know, like, what are some of the problems? And it seems like some of the things is the message feels watered down, which probably means they're overworked because they're trying to do a lot of other things to compensate for a weak story. They probably don't feel good doing that, so they're stepping on their team's toes to do what they're comfortable with.
Sure.
Uh, what else is happening in their lives that is a
Yeah.
symptom of
Yeah.
this problem?
Another one is, I think they feel scattered, right? I call it the creativity conundrum, right? The more creative ideas you have, the harder it is to get any of them done, right? Because you're constantly chasing the next idea and this, well, we could do this, we could do this. And so they're feeling very busy, but ultimately lacking the focus, lacking the direction, right? And so they feel like they're often reinventing who they are. Like they have to, in different settings, like, I'm not sure who I am and what the story is that I'm telling, because the story you're telling is often shaped by your audience. And so maybe they're not clear on their audience. And so therefore they're not clear on their story. I think the other people are people who are struggling to embrace the value of their own message, the value of their own story. So they may feel like they're holding back. They feel like, I think I could do more, but I lack the confidence to do more.
I don't think they would say it like that. I think
True.
what that would manifest as is if somebody struggling to embrace their value of their own message is deeply affected by the neurosis of, I need to work hard in order to be enough because who I am is not enough, and so I must work hard. And so they would put themselves in situations and give themselves opportunities to work harder and harder until you were like my guest yesterday,
Right.
who was at 2 a.m. doing everything that the business owner needs to do and throughout the day, micromanaging all of his teams.
Mm,
And
mhm,
so
mhm.
I don't think that they would necessarily, like, just for the sake of this, I
Yeah.
don't know if most people would say I'm a bad storyteller in this moment, even though that's probably the case. But it's just like that's what, if I was taking the extreme of struggling to embrace the value of the message, that's what it would look like as a symptom for me.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I certainly understand that. I have encountered just so many people though who have said that of, all right, people have told me my message has value. They've told me my story. If I shared it more, if I were more strategic, I don't know. Does it really? Is it really? I think that's a symptomatic of, when they pull back that curtain, what I'm talking about is at the core of that, there's this self-doubt that then, like you
Yes.
said, causes them to, all right, I'm just going to get busier because that'll give me the dopamine hit I need to feel better, like I'm doing something constructive and we're moving it forward. But busier isn't necessarily better.
And people would confuse, if you're not good at telling stories, it's hard to know if you are telling a bad story or are a bad storyteller, right? And people
Mm,
think they're telling a bad story. They tell their story badly, and then
sure.
they think they have a bad story, and then they make
Right.
decisions like what
Right.
we just said
Right.
earlier.
Right. Well, and I think, one of the things that I talk about in my book, Your Story Advantage, is using what we call the storytelling structure, which is a 5-part kind of proven storytelling process. Because I think some people view storytelling as mysterious, right? It's you either can do it or you can't. And I think there's both an art and a science to it, right? There's a structure that if you follow the structure, it can actually free you to be creative in what you're telling and how you're telling it about that. But if you begin with a proven process as a foundation, I'm sure. I mean, this. I'm sure you go about this, and as you're coaching people with signature talks and stuff, you
Mhm.
begin with what works. Then you can be free to be creative in that and build on that, rather than people feeling like I'm just throwing stuff against the wall and hoping something sticks and reinventing it every time.
Yeah. What else is different or better about the story advantage process?
Well, I'll go back to that art and science idea. I talk about the connection continuum, this idea that a lot of people think they have to have a story that's so fresh and innovative and groundbreaking that nobody's ever heard anything like this before. But in fact, that can actually be counterproductive. This
Yes.
idea, if you think of it as a gauge, if you're too different from what people already know, then that creates disconnect. But if you're too familiar to what people already know, then it feels like it's just the same thing I've heard, duplication of other people's stories. And so it's finding that right balance in the middle, right? You want to connect with what they know and then introduce what they don't know and introduce that fresh perspective on it. And it just amazes me, Kyle, so many times people will hear a story and I'll hear the story and I'll think, all right, that story is a lot like other stories I've heard. It's maybe teaching a very similar message to what I've heard, but it's the story itself that gives it a fresh setting, a fresh context, some unique angle from the storyteller that people are in the audience and the readers will be like, oh, I never thought of it that way before. It's like a light bulb will come on, right? And it gives people that moment of awakening, if you will, that makes it feel totally fresh in what they're doing, even though when you or I might look at it, we might say, all right, that's like 90% similar to this other message. But it's just that 10% distinctiveness of the story that sets it apart enough for people. It almost, I think there's some solid science behind it. It activates parts of our brain that light up and then make it more receptive to hearing
Totally.
what it is the message is.
What I would say to build on and slightly modify, um, I think is like there's almost never a bad story, and the moments that somebody like has has deeply in common, like everybody wants to jump out of a burning building with a baby,
Right, right, right.
but really the best stories are the ones, I would say, that somebody could come up to you and say the same thing happened to me.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
what would create the effect of I've heard this before or I'm bored versus that was incredible is just how you tell it. And really like who you tell it to, which is also kind of influences how you tell it. If you are
Exactly.
aware, and this was something you said earlier, is like most people when there's this egregious error on stages that causes a lot of people to make bad decisions of when they think about themselves and like what's exciting for me to
Yep.
talk about on this
Exactly.
talk. They
Exactly.
wanted me to speak. How do I prove myself to my audience to so they are without a doubt
Yeah.
know that I'm the smart one,
Right.
instead
Right.
of how do I serve these people?
Right.
How do I
Exactly.
relate to them?
You're
And
exactly right. Exactly right. I like to say that your story is about you, but your story is not for you.
mhm,
And so when you're speaking to an audience, what works for you is irrelevant. It's like, who is the audience and what do they need to hear? And let that filter and determine what parts of your story you share and how you share it in a way that is designed to position them to get the most impact. Because let's face it, I mean, it's a very distracting world that we live in. And so our job as storytellers is to help people get the message through that distraction filter, grab their attention, and hopefully move them to take positive action that would make the world a better place. And so I think it is that understanding that your story is about you, but it's not for you. And so you have to tell it through the lens of what is it that my audience needs to hear, not to your point. Our default is, well, what do I want to talk about? And
totally.
that isn't necessarily what the audience wants to hear.
There's a weird selfish thing to this if most people can, you can't quite see through it all. But when you start to think about stories in service of your audience, it energizes you and it infuses purpose into stories.
Right.
And the moments that you once thought were things that you were ashamed of or would never
Mhm.
want to share,
Yeah.
or are inappropriate, when you
Mhm.
infuse purpose via service,
Yeah.
you become excited to share these things.
Yeah.
And so, but most people wouldn't choose that particular avenue of personal development as their
Yeah.
first choice to develop themselves, but it's powerful.
Yeah, I talk about that as tension in our storytelling structure. The tension is what are the challenges that are faced, and I agree with you. It's that vulnerability of sharing your challenges that open the door for others to acknowledge their challenges and to hear potential solutions to their challenges and wanting to do that. And there's something powerful that takes place when we're willing to talk about those things, those struggles. I mean, when I look back at my time stepping away from the school, I mentioned, going a year with no income, 6 kids. I would not recommend that that path for everybody. Even if I had to do it over, I might think, I'm going to do this a little bit differently, right? Because when you step out into something new, what you think is going to happen is seldom what actually happens. Right.
Yeah.
But you just need to see enough clarity and enough belief to take the next step and the next step, and the next step. And there were many times that we were wondering, all right, how are we going to pay the mortgage? Are we going to feed the kids? Are we going to end up living in a cardboard box underneath the freeway somewhere? What does that look like if we step out and really follow what I'm passionate about and do? What I realized was that the people who are in that situation, who are living under a bridge or in a box or in those conditions, they're not there because they stepped out to follow their passions and their calling. They're there because of other unfortunate reasons. And that forward momentum that we create when we do these things is what positions us to move into a better season of life, or a more effective and powerful season of life, even though we don't always know how that's going to unfold, right? It's unknown, but it's that forward positive momentum that begins to push us into that direction.
Perfect segue. I want to hear about that moment for you. Maybe this was leaving the school, but I want to know when you were struggling to embrace the value of your story, throwing stuff against the wall, feeling scattered. You have a ton of creative ideas, but it's hard to get them done. You're so busy and you have no focus. And this is affecting your freedom in many different ways. When specifically in time and space, Bill, did you feel these experiences?
Well, there have been several times with that, but I'm going to go ahead and just talk about something that's very fresh, very raw for me, Kyle, if that's all right.
I would
Um,
be delighted to receive that.
I haven't spoken about this publicly yet. I'm just processing a lot of it, but One of the things I realized was after I had stepped out and Storybuilders was off the ground, we've been working for a few years. We ran into a situation where because we want to serve people so much and do so and help them in so many ways that we began to like spread ourselves thinner, right? Do more things for the same people, and we began to get outside of our sweet spot of storytelling and so forth. And we eventually reached the point where I had to pull that back, and we reached the point where we had a particular project that we thought was going to be really successful, ended up not being through no fault of our own, but not being. And so it put the business in a rather precarious position. So a lot of, if you're an entrepreneur, you've been here before, right? You've been in these positions. But what I realized, what I did at that time was instead of leaning into more of my passion, my sense of calling and so forth, I began to pull back a little bit, just a little bit in fear, right? In fear of what might go wrong here, what might fail, what this isn't looking good. As we talked earlier, I need to get busy. I need to do work. I need to work harder. I need to put in more hours. I need to do this. I need to do that, and I can pull this off. And I didn't realize at the time, right? It's all good things. We were helping people and so forth, but what really happened there was I began to pull back from that
Hold on,
passion
Bill. Before
driven
we
me.
get to
Yeah.
the solution, I
Yeah.
don't want any solutions yet. I want problems. I want
Okay.
experiences. I want to smell what it was like in that room.
Yeah.
Tell me a room when the room that you said I need to get busy. Where were you? What was it? Tuesday afternoon.
I think I was sitting in the car outside a Barnes and
Yes.
Noble bookstore. I don't remember the day of the week, but it was a morning, a cloudy morning. I was up in Ohio again, visiting family, and just wrestling with, all right, what are we going to do now? How are we gonna fix this? How are we gonna do this?
What
You know,
specifically was going on?
I mean, like most entrepreneurial things, it was cash flow, right? It
Uh huh.
was, hey, we thought we had this project, we thought this cash flow was coming, and now suddenly it's not. And so, what do we do with that, right? Do we continue to move forward? Do we cut back on team members? What do we do? Is this, and it brought back those same fears for me of, are we going to be back under the bridge? Are we going to be back living in the box? We're going to be doing that kind of thing,
You say
right?
that as if you'd been there before.
No, only in my head. Yeah.
I have a same van by the river that I picture from time to time.
Yeah.
Um, but okay, so we've
Yeah.
never been. All right, great. Anyway,
Yeah, which is ironic, right? I've never had to live by the river, and yet there's the fear of
what were you shopping for at Barnes and Noble?
probably nothing. I was probably a place to hang out where there was coffee and Wi-Fi, right? And get work done, right? Whatever that was supposed to be. Um, yeah.
Because your office was too crazy.
It's virtual company, so there wasn't an office. I could work
Oh, okay.
wherever, anywhere I needed to. Yeah.
And you didn't want to work at home.
Well, I was visiting
Oh,
family.
you were visiting
Yeah,
family. Yes,
I
yes,
was out
yes,
of town.
yes, yes.
We lived in Atlanta at that time, so I was back, visiting at the time. So that was probably my office for the day. Was probably the Barnes and Noble, actually.
Okay,
Yeah,
great. And these cash flow things, everything's fallen down, and then you
and,
set
and
out on a journey.
yeah, and there was a sense of there in the back of all that was my wife, right, and the kids, and
Good.
all right, what am I going to tell them, and how's that going to work? And wow, I feel like a failure, right? I feel like dad didn't come through, that kind of stuff, and
Were
now
there
what do
any
we do?
signs that your kids, like, what was something in that time you like missed the softball game and your kid looked at you in this way or something like that?
I don't think so, except
No?
that when we started the project, we actually included them in the decision process of, hey, there's some risk involved with this, but we think it's worthwhile. What do you guys think? Like, so they were embracing that same decision. And so I think I was concerned about what will that do to their sense of faith, to their sense of willingness to step out in life and try something new. If they see that, oh, this didn't work, maybe I should not try new things next time. Right. And what that could cause.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing. And wife, anything, any strain, tension there?
With you said with my wife?
Yeah.
I mean, just paying the bills. She's the one who, for many years, when I was leading the private school, like she made that all happen, the finances and stuff behind the scenes, and made it with 6 kids and all that kind of stuff. And so, probably some element of I don't want her to go through that again, and
Yeah.
to go through that hard season again, and hopefully she won't have to do that.
I love this. Okay. And so you did this and things started changing. And now I want to hear about the exact opposite energetic moment. I want to hear about a time when cash flow was great, business was going good. You felt valuable in yourself and you knew how to channel that value into wins. And so you had created space to be present with your kids and your wife and to make art. When was the moment that you were like, wow, I really made it?
Man, frankly, there have been so many. One was probably, the first book that I wrote that made the New York Times list. This was a book with Lewis Howes that I wrote with him that made the list. And it was interesting because 10 years prior to that, to almost to the day, I had written in a journal, one of my goals was to write a book that made the New York Times list. And with Lewis, the first one that made the list was with him. So that felt good. That was what, 22, 3?
Yeah.
Right. So it took some years to get there, but it felt good. And to feel like, we've,
What happened on the day when you saw it? Did you celebrate yourself? Did you do a vacation afterwards? Anything happened? How did you find out? Was it through email? How do you get informed that a book is a New York Times bestseller?
yeah, I mean, they post it. It goes public for anybody to see. I
Yeah.
think Lewis and his team, they were probably the first to see it and pass it along to me. So we kind of celebrated digitally together and what that looked like. But for the most part, frankly, it was more, all right, great. Let's do more.
What were
Let's
the other
build on that.
circumstances in your life? Did you have more time and energy?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, we had a great team to rely on to run things. I didn't feel, as opposed to that first season, I didn't feel like had to do everything myself or like I was carrying the entire load in trying to get things done. Right, so didn't feel isolated. Felt like there was a incredible team around me to support me in that regard. And with the family, I mean, the family was in a really good place as well. The kids were all thriving in their own directions, and we were living in a really great place and not under the freeway. Right, so a lot of those fears proved to be unfounded.
Excellent. Are you ready to hear your story? Am I going to be living under a bridge in a couple of weeks? I'm sitting in the noise and buzz of a Starbucks coffee shop inside of a Barnes and Noble, looking at my laptop, switching from page to page, trying to figure out how to run the numbers. I have left a job to start a business, and I've gone out on a limb to take care of my family. Not too long ago, I can still remember gathering my children around and telling them that I wanted to take this risk, that I wanted them involved in the choice. And I've taken the leap. And now I'm facing some of the hardest decisions in my life. Am I going to have to let people go in my business, cut the team? It feels like it because I have to do everything myself in the work that I do, or it's all going to fall apart. And if I let up even for a second, I can just picture all of my family in a box under a bridge. And so I'm visiting family. So I'm away at this Barnes and Noble to grab some coffee and Wi-Fi. And I'm just wondering when I get back what I'm going to tell my kids, what I'm going to tell my family when we're supposed to be on vacation and I'm going away to hide from them. And I wonder how my wife's going to think of this. She's been helping me pay the bills because the business isn't taking off. And she's supported me through so much. And I just feel like a failure. I take some time to reflect on and remember the life that I really wanted to create, who I wanted to be when I set out to do these things. And I remember one of the first things on my list of goals is to write a New York Times bestseller. And I decided I needed to figure out how that could work. And over the course of a few years and a lot of costly and painful mistakes, I began to develop what I now call the story advantage. I wanted structure in my stories enough to allow me freedom to be creative while still being effective and precise. I wanted to start with a proven foundation of good ideas that I could build on and then bring myself into and value myself, not just my work. I wanted to blend art and science and the magic of story into every business choice that I did. And I slowly began to work on this, first for myself. And I can remember one day after a long time, many years, many collaborations, of getting a notification for the first time that a book that I collaborated with Lewis Howes, using all of these story techniques I'd been developed, wrote the New York Times bestseller. I remember celebrating digitally with this team, heading back home a little bit early, feeling supported by my own team now because we have a story and we have a message and we all know what we're doing. My team members are helping me instead of constantly asking for questions. I have more time with my family and my kids and my wife. And I realize that this incredible journey I've been on could help so many other people. And so that's what I'm here to talk to you about today is how to create your own story advantage.
Well done, Kyle.
Thank you, Bill.
Yeah. Yeah.
I appreciate you and going out on a limb for us with something you haven't spoken about too much before.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I feel like there's, well, I mean, that's what I'm passionate about. I think people need to be able to share their story with the world. And if I can't do it, then why would I be inspiring other people to do it? Right.
I love it.
So I appreciate your willingness to take that and package it in that way, to show the value of it, right? Because that really is what it's all about. And I love what you do. I mean, you're modeling the power of story and the effectiveness of that to open those doors. That's amazing.
Thank you so much. Well, yeah,
Absolutely.
we want to create the feeling in ourselves that we want to inspire in our audience. And so many things of what you've just said today are deeply confirming and validating. I'm
Yeah.
harping on this same stuff all of the time. But
Yeah.
on that note, do you have any closing thoughts for us today? And where can we go to learn more about you?
Well, I mean, my closing thought is maybe something around this idea of I always say, if you want to elevate, you must collaborate, right? This, that like we just talked about in my story, this temptation to take it on yourself and think, I can do this, I can do it myself. And as you and I know, you need to surround yourself with talented people who can help do things and help you actually fulfill those visions. So if people want to connect, first of all, they can go to yourstoryadvantage.com to find out more about the book. We've got a bunch of cool bonuses that go with that. Yourstoryadvantage.com is the book. It's free resources available through the book. And then if they want to connect, just go to mystorybuilders.com/story and just schedule time to talk. I'd love to hear your story. I'd love to hear where people are coming from and see if we can be of help to them. So that's mystorybuilders.com/story to kind of start that conversation.
Amazing. And I don't think there was a closing thought yet.
Well, my closing thought was, if you want to elevate, you got to collaborate.
Oh, yes, yes,
And
yes.
if you
That's true.
think about that story, your story, don't think that you have to do it all by yourself.
Uh,
You can only take it so far, and you get distracted so easily. So the best, most well-known people I've worked with have embraced that truth at a very foundational level is who do I work with to help elevate my message, to help get it out in the world and make it more effective and powerful and truly make the world a better place. It begins with that collaboration.
Bill Blankschaen, thank you for collaborating with me today. And thank you
Oh,
for
absolutely.
joining us on the Story Engine podcast.
It's a pleasure, Kyle. Thank you.